Hey everybody, I'm Jason Mefford. I'm back with Brad Miller, and we are walking a spiritual path today with you. And if everything rolls out the way it's supposed to, this should be episode number 100. If
Woohoo!
it doesn't, if there's a technical issue and this becomes 99 or 101, hey, it was supposed to be that way, right?
That's right.
But we thought it would be kind of fun because, after 100 episodes, to go back and talk a little bit about maybe some of the lessons that we've learned. I know one of the first episodes we recorded, I think, was, what is spirituality, what it kind of meant to us. And so we thought it would be fun to just kind of go back and maybe talk about that topic again a little bit now that it's been a couple of years. Doesn't seem like it's been that long that we've been doing this. But here we are, and so let's get into that. So I can't exactly remember what I said the first
You don't
time.
remember 2 years ago what exactly words you
I
used and
can't remember what I had for breakfast, sort of thing. But it's, Brad, I guess is there are there some things, I guess posing that question again. How do you see it, or from us on this journey, at least of recording and thinking more about our spirituality and the things that we're learning, how would you kind of
Mhm.
answer that question today, or what does it mean to you now?
So I did not listen to that episode. I mean, I know we've done it and it's one of the first couple ones. I did not go back and listen to it. But what I do remember is that a lot of or at least for me anyway, kind of the direction of what spirituality was kind of focused around there being something bigger,
Mhm.
something greater out there. Whatever you want to call it, universe, spirit, source, God, whatever you might want to be. That's what I remember was kind of the crux of it was that, spirituality is kind of figuring out or investigating maybe what that is, what else is out there, you know, beyond. Um, and so now looking back 2 years later, I think I've taken a little more of an internal view of spirituality from that, um, as opposed to looking at, oh, what else is out there? What's the big whatever behind everything? To me, right now, spirituality is more about the internal stuff. It's about the personal growth. It's about transformation of listening, of going inside. Um, those things that make us different from where we were 2 years ago than where we are today.
Huh. Yeah, because I know, and there's a lot of things in this world, and we've kind of talked a little bit about that before, like if there's signs and other things that are around. And there's a reason why religion is in this world, right? Because for a lot of people, some sort of religious background, at least now, tends to be the way that people come to a knowing or a realization of something bigger, right? This whole
Mhm.
concept of God. And each religion kind of, talks about God a little bit differently. And each person has a slightly different belief as to, what that higher power or God or, whatever term people use, what that actually means. But it's there for a reason, right? For us to all, be able to use it along our path. And like you just said, right? I mean, that was the bigger, greater was kind of the
Mhm.
thing that you were thinking more about, along a couple of years ago. Now it's more the
Mhm.
internal work, the internal growth, the evolvement that you're actually making, which I think it's all connected in that way too, and probably deeper than I'll go on the podcast publicly to describe right now. But there's a reason why we all kind of start to come to that realization. And I remember there's an old story, right? That I kind of heard that goes along with this. And whether it happened, whether it didn't happen, it doesn't matter. It's a good story, right? Where the gods were sitting around and talking about this world. And they said, okay, well, here are some of the keys of the universe, the things that people need to learn to grow. And so they're sitting around in council together and they're like, okay, we've got to hide this truth somewhere. Where are we going to hide it to make it difficult for people to find, right? So that there has to be some work involved in growing, right? Because typically when we have a harder challenge or task to do, right, we learn more when we do that. And
Mhm.
so they're like, okay, so where are we going to hide this? And so we're all sitting around in council talking and said, one person raises their hand and says, how about if we hide it in the top of a mountain? Because then it would be very difficult. They got to climb up the mountain to get up there and debated it for a little while and decided, no, that's still a little too easy for people to find, right? People may just stumble upon it, right? Because they're there as opposed to really searching for it and having the growth that they need to. So I go, okay, well, where else could we hide it? And so, thinking, debating a little bit, and somebody raises their hand and says, what if we put it in the bottom of the ocean? And so debated that a little while, blah, 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 blah. But no, same thing. Just like, that seems a little too easy for people to find, and people may stumble upon it and blah, 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 blah. Some kind of the same discussion as before. Well, okay, where are we gonna put this, right? Somebody else raises their hand. What if we put it inside of them? They'll never think to look there. And that's really a lot of, kind of what you just talked about is I think so much of, and even religion teaches this, we have to look to the priest, to the minister, something outside. We have to look to, holy texts, the Bible, other things. We've got to look to, some white bearded man that sits in the skies, right? Which is what most religions how they kind of describe God. But those are all things external when, like you said, really all of the answers, all of the knowings, everything in the entire universe is within us. And this is one of those concepts that it's hard to reason with our 3D mind. And that's why in spirituality, you have to throw out reason, right? Because reason will just confuse you and it doesn't make sense logically, but that's the way it is. And that's the way it was intended, right? Which again, I think a lot of times that you've come across that or
Mhm.
have kind of turned to that and realizing that, for, and I'll give an example of that is most people have been taught to pray to God for the things that they need. Pray to God for an answer. Pray to God for, help in my business. Pray to God
Mhm.
for, health and healing, right?
Mhm.
External. And most of the ways that people are taught, it's like a whiny little kid, right, who is begging for something. Oh God, oh God, oh God, please heal me, please heal me, please heal me, right?
Mhm.
It's again looking outside for something that is inside, or even, and I'm not saying don't pray, But what if, when people start praying differently, different things happen, right? Because instead of, oh God, please heal me, God, whatever term you want to use, if it's a specific being that you want to call upon, okay. I am grateful for the healing I have. There's much more power in praying that way. It comes from a place of gratitude, not from a place of wanting, right? And there's a totally different energy that comes from that, right? Or, relying on ourselves and being responsible and realizing that we can control and do a lot of these things on our own, even without needing the help of somebody external. Now, again, we all need guidance, we all need help from time to time, but we are all much more powerful than we realize. And so I think for me, that's one of the big things of switching from a religious standpoint to a spiritual standpoint is the sense of empowerment that kind of comes with it, right? Of realizing that when you go within, anything is possible. And so it's interesting that you bring that up because I've also been along that journey and kind of understanding that more and playing with that more and can see the power in it uh, when we change the focus. And it doesn't mean that we're being selfish or that we're being egotistical either, right?
Mhm.
I actually wrote a poem a long time ago that was called The God for Me. And the God for me is me. Now that sounds pretty egotistical, but not when you
Yeah.
start to put it on the lens of what we're talking about of going within.
Hmm.
And I wrote that long before I was on the current spiritual path that I'm on. But
Hmm.
something came through me, some kind of past knowing already knew that without really being able to explain it or understand it.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like very similar. Like I said, I vaguely remember again when we had this conversation, not really being sure what spirituality is, but kind of my thoughts were it's something big outside me, all this kind of thing. Um, and yeah, just going through the path, um, this last 2 years, just the change of, like you said, realizing it's not something external. Everything is inside. And honestly, and again, I've kind of known that too before. Back in, I think it was in law school that I had a class that was, and I don't remember what the title or the topic was, but the professor was talking about um, kind of about, beliefs and kind of, I think probably kind of where we come with our sense of justice and things like that. And a lot of times it's kind of religious based with morals and things like
Mhm.
that. And it's the kind of idea that everyone has this idea of, the religion and things, but and then God or whatever. But realistically, it's all personal to you. Your religion, your stuff is personal to you and inside you. And at the time, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And I didn't take a second thought of it. But now being able to look back and after you shared, kind of your story there, and talking about just the different, kind of ways that God is, whatever you want to call it, and kind of inside you, that belief has kind of been there, but it's just coming more clear.
Mhm.
Um, and kind of walking down that path, continuing to see things that like, yep, that makes sense. Yep, that make better understanding how that goes now. Um, you know,
Well, and I was smiling because you said, personal to you,
Hmm.
which is something also that I have learned, especially probably that's hitting home much more the last couple of years. Because when I work with my Don, that's one thing he says all the time. My relationship with you is personal to you, right? So we might be sitting in a group of people and he'll say, my relationship is personal to you, and point to one person or call us by name and kind of
Hmm.
go around, right? And I can see, as he's apprenticing us, how each one of us, he not that he treats, that's not necessarily the right word, but how he instructs us in a personal way, because we are all unique individuals. Uh, we all have different experiences. We all are different light beings. And so, because of the lessons that we have to learn, because of our personalities is not the right word, but it kind of
Yeah,
means
no.
it, right? I mean, that our journeys are personal. And I think that's one thing hopefully, everybody that's listening can understand. And that's why we're not here prescribing certain things. We might share certain practices, right, that you may do, but you choose to do it how it works best for you. And so I'll
Mhm.
give you an example is, this little group that I work with closely, sometimes we're given certain tools or practices or recordings. And and one of them in particular happens to be a recording. It's a song that we were given. And it was interesting, we all kind of experienced it, got it at the same time. But then when we came back and were sharing or talking about it 6 months later, it was interesting to see how each one of us used that recording slightly differently, right? Because we're all unique. We all have our own art. We all have, our own gifts. And for some people, certain tools or practices resonate more with them than maybe they do other people. And that's okay, right? Because there's no one right way to do it. We all have our own art. The main thing is kind of the growth and the evolvement and the development, the increasing our consciousness, shedding things that no longer serve us, having those shamanic deaths, becoming new people each day, doing the best we can each day in the way that we do it in our beautiful art form. And so I think it's interesting that you bring that up too, because it is all unique. And I know some people out there might be like, well, give me the checklist. We've told you before, we can't give you a checklist, right? And so some people listening to us might be like, oh, those guys are full of shit. They don't know what they're talking about. I just want a checklist. Well, go to a religion, go to some, pseudo fake shaman. They're probably going to give you a list and they're going to tell everybody that you have to do it a certain way. But that's not how it's really done. And so I think sometimes that can frustrate people, but
Mhm.
that's part of the process. It's part of the
Yeah,
process.
especially us kind of type A, very logical driven people who like the processes, the plans. We like to know, like, okay, how do we from A to B? I go step one and two and three and four and five and six and seven and eight and nine and 10, 11, 12, 13. And if I follow everything in order, then I know that I'm going to get to where I'm going. And so it's really important that I have everything in order, that I've got all my supplies, that I've got my checklist, that I can prepare properly. Because I want, all this stuff that we tend to think of. And I know this because I am working on not being that way anymore as
Hmm.
much. But I've, I drive my wife crazy, years ago when I would say, okay, what are we doing? What's the plan? How are we going to do it? And I, try to get the details. And she's like, I don't know. Like, I just want to do this, and that's like, I don't care the rest of it. Like, stop worrying about it. We'll figure it out as it gets there. And so that's kind of the situation here. Like, if you try to go and think of the step lists you got to do, the checklists, there is none. And I know that's tough because a lot of us want that. There's a lot of professionals and things like that who listening. Yeah, like you said, we don't offer that. We can't offer that because there are no steps or no checklists. There's no checklist to heaven, as it were. Like,
No.
you have to. That's why this is a path. That's why this is a journey. And we're each on our own separate journey. Who we're all going to get someplace differently, and we're going to take different routes to get there. And um, I mean, that's kind of why we're doing this, and so we can explain what we're doing, and so you can kind of see where maybe you fit into everything. But at the end of the day, see how your path is going to be different.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because as you were talking, it reminded me of uh, one of the podcasts that I did before on my jamming with Jason that I know you listened to about toilet paper. And so I'm just going to use this as kind of a metaphor to explain this, right? Which is again, someone at some point plasmated toilet paper. They invented toilet paper and said, haha, here is toilet paper. It is something to wipe your butt after you take a dump so that you don't have, you know, things in your butt crack that you don't want, right? Okay. So here you go, Brad. Here's toilet paper, right? And so, but there's no real instructions, with it. It's not like there's one right way to use toilet paper. There's not. And again, I mean, I use this as an example of how we all get kind of stuck in our beliefs. We get taught a certain way, and so that's just the way we do it,
Mhm.
right? But, with toilet paper, it's like, well, do you fold it? Do you scrunch it? Do you roll it? Right? Those are different techniques of getting it off the roll. When it's hanging on the roll, does it flop down or is it backwards, right? And there's a big debate about, oh, it has to be this way. And yes, I think the patent showed it going one way, but there's no right way, right? Do you stand up or do you continue to sit down when you wipe? And to me, that was like, why would you stand up? That doesn't make any sense. But a lot of people do, right? And so it's one of those things like what we're talking about of, you know, Brad, Jason, here's a spiritual practice. Go use it, right? And so we're handed a roll of toilet paper, and then we have to figure out how best to use it for us, right? And again, I'm a folder because I was taught to fold it. I watched my dad fold, right? As a little kid, watched my dad go to the bathroom, and that kind of taught me how to do it. That's what I'm comfortable with. That's what works for me, but it's not the only way to do it. And I think that's an example too of where, sometimes we'll throw the word dogma out there, especially as it relates to religion, but there's a lot of dogma in pseudo spirituality too, where people will tell you that you have to do things in a particular way to get the result, and you don't,
Mhm.
right? There's many, many different ways to get to the same place. And so I think it's part of spirituality is removing the dogma, removing the indoctrinations, removing the false beliefs, removing the negative energy, right, that's in our life and replacing it with higher and better energy.
Mhm.
And to me, I think that's a big part of spirituality as well, and being able to recognize the difference between those
Mhm.
and finding your best path forward.
Yeah. And for the record, I fold and then I scrunch.
You fold
So
and scrunch.
yes,
Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. There's a new one. So
right.
anyway, hopefully that kind of helps explain what we're talking about there. But I think too, I think on the first episode, I talked a lot about connection. And to me, that is still a very big part of it. In fact, I've leaned a lot more into that connection side of it. And here's what I mean. We're thrown in this earth like we're inside a box or have a bag over our head. We can't remember who we really are, where we really came from, because that's part of our growth and involvement here is to remember, know yourself and remember. And that's a big part of spirituality. It's a big part of any ancient tradition, in codes of conduct, in universal laws, for us to follow. And I think, part of that knowing and that remembering is also to to remember unity consciousness. Because in this world, we live in a world of duality, positive, negative, good, bad, right? Light, dark. And that's on purpose because we learn by seeing duality and by living duality. But the goal is to come back into unity consciousness because everything around us, everything in the universe, everything in the galaxies, everything in our part of the bigger, cosmos came from the same thing. And there was a big bang, right? And we all went out. These little bits and particles of the bigger whole went out on their own to experience the universe from their individual perspective. And that's what we're doing right now, right? Brad's having different experiences than I am, and
Mhm.
you're having different experiences than the two of us are, right? And because of that, we're all learning, the universe is learning, the prime creators are learning what's going on because that's just the way the plan is. And so, to me, part of the spirituality as well is remembering that and connecting and loving and being grateful for everything around us, realizing that we are all the same, we are all a part of the bigger whole, we all are here to play roles for each other in this life. Again, whether we're humans interacting or we're interacting with four-legged animals or trees or rocks or whatever it is, that as we learn to connect and be grateful for everything around us, that's part of our growth and evolvement too. And to me, a huge part of spirituality. It seems so simple, right? But it's again, we were all one. We all knew we're thrown here, we forget everything, and part of it is remembering and connecting back with us. And that's why sometimes in the sacred texts, it's again doesn't make logical sense, right? God is everywhere and nowhere. What does that mean? Right? It does when you start to see it from a different paradigm.
Mhm.
And that's that's part of this whole process too.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I, on the three level, that's what I try to help people do is see different things from different perspectives, to look at different things from a different point of view. Um, kind of as opposed to the way that things have always been, maybe what happens if you think of it this way instead? What might that look like? And it's the same thing here. It's just
Mhm.
looking at something from a different perspective. Um, kind of different than what maybe we've always been taught by told by people, by our parents. by societies, by religion, especially if we grew up kind of in a religious, um, kind of household or whatnot. Just the different views that we've got. Um, you know, Taking a different look view of things. And like I said, um, yeah, it's definitely a different way of looking at things that, and I don't know, I'm kind of tripping over the words here, but it makes it makes the experience different as well.
Yeah, well, and I think it helps you to put things in a bigger perspective, right? Because, on this world, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of abuse, of using, right? And when we can start to see that connection and feel connected and realize that everything is the same as us, right? Where, you know, would you beat your dog if you realize that the dog is you? And by beating the dog, you're beating yourself, right? Thinking about it from that perspective makes us, or I hope, makes us want to live in more of a unity consciousness, with more love, with more gratitude, with more kindness to everything around us, right? Instead of just seeing a tree as something that you can chop down to make lumber and earn money for, or chop down to burn so you're warm. But if we can start seeing them as a fellow brother or sister, if you will, and not that, again, that trees are here for us to do some of those things, right? They're here to provide us shade. They're here to provide us with oxygen. We're here to provide them with carbon monoxide, right? We're here to water them, to tend them, right? And so there becomes this symbiotic relationship. And trees don't mind being cut down to be used for lumber and a house that can help protect us. They don't mind being cut down to be used as firewood to help keep us warm. But when we have that connection, we start to feel a lot more grateful for those trees, right? And it's different. It goes back to, in a lot of the ancient traditions, you had to hunt, you had to kill an animal to eat. We still do, right? But the difference is now we just shove them through a slaughterhouse and we treat them like shit, right? We make them stand in their own shit, and just kill them without that gratitude and that compassion, as opposed to in ancient traditions, you'd shoot a deer or an elk or whatever happened to go, whatever it happened to be, and while you were doing it, or as you were cleaning it, you were blessing it. Brother deer, I am so grateful for your sacrifice, and I promise to use your skin to clothe me, your meat to feed me, your bones to make tools for me, that your sacrifice will not go to waste, right? Whew, that's a totally different place to come from, right? Than, oh, I shot this deer and I'm going to hang its head on the wall so everybody can see what a big badass hunter I am. Two different energies, right? The one is 3D ego, the other is spirituality, right? And realizing that these things are sacrificing for us, and so we sacrifice for them as well. And when you can start living from that standpoint, that's when things really, really start to change in your life. And to me, that is the spiritual path, and it's one of the most important things that we can do or learn in this life. Because it's not what we're taught, too,
Right.
right? So it's one of those where we have to, drop the beliefs, break the indoctrinations, and start to see it different. and it's interesting because I think it's, especially now, and you're going to see more of this coming, but a lot more UFO activity and star brothers and sisters in the skies and on the earth, right? And and what's interesting is, a lot of people long for that or want that, you know. But it's like, if you can't see the person sitting next to you of a different religion or of a different skin color or of a different age or of a different opinion, if you can't see them and love them for who they are as they are, what makes you think you're going to be able to do that for star brothers and sisters that look completely different than us, right? Um, and again, all these things are put here on purpose for us to learn, to grow, so we can be ready for the next, whatever that might be, right? But I think it's a lot of it is starting small, it's starting simple. Um, because yeah, it's ironic because the Star brothers and sisters are like, if you all down there can't get along when you look so much
With
alike,
yourselves. Yeah.
what are you gonna what are you gonna do about me? Right? Until you get that figured out, right? And you can start living in unity that way, there's no way you're going to live in unity with us because you're going to see us as so foreign and so different that you're not even going to give us a chance. So I don't know why that came up, but it did.
It needs to come out.
Hmm.
We don't know why. Sometimes it just does.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a refresh or update maybe from 2 years ago about talking about this. Like I said, I think we'll keep talking about a lot of the same things because it all comes back to some of the same things over and over again too. Um,
Yeah. No, I think you can break it all down to very simple concepts. Gratitude, I mean, is one of them. Are you grateful for everything? Do you see everything as one? Like you said, just these very simple things that I know we've talked about this, that it's hard at first maybe to get because they seem that they're so simple.
mhm.
Why what's the purpose of blessing my water? What's that seems kind of silly, right? Pour my water out. Thank you, water. I bless you. What, right? Um, but it's just all. I mean, it's a lot deeper than just
Well,
that.
and that's one of those where again, and it's like I said, that's the very simpleness of starting. But when you start doing it, you start wanting to connect with the water. You start realizing that we're no different than the water. You start realizing what else water actually does for us besides just hydrate us. You start to realize what water does for this planet. When you bless the water and you see that you can bless water, you start to realize you can bless other things too, right? And so it's a very simple but very deep practice as you continue it.
Mhm.
It's a way to remember and be grateful as well, right? And so it's
Yep.
like you said, Brad, it's a very simple thing, and a lot of people might be like, "Well, what's the big deal?" Well, it's a big deal in a lot of ways. Just try it. Just start doing it. Do it for 30 days, do it for 90 days. Start seeing if you have a different relationship with water. And I know a lot of people, water is plentiful in a lot of places in this world. I live in the desert. I have hiked in the desert for days at a time. I have a different relationship with water because it's so much more precious and scarce where I live, right, than maybe other people do. But even if it's plentiful, anyone can start to have a deeper relationship and a different relationship with water. It's something that's plentiful enough everywhere that anybody can do it. Uh,
Mhm.
so, yeah.
So yeah, so I mean that's kind of where I guess our thoughts kind of on spirituality have ended up here 2 years later. Um, Again, like I said, for me, it's kind of gone from the external stuff and not really sure what I guess I was really getting myself into when we started this 2 years ago. It seemed
Oh,
like
Brad, that's why I kept asking you, are you sure you want to do this?
it seemed like a good idea at the time, and like something that may be fun to do, but um, when you start kind of walking on this path, uh,
Mhm.
yeah, as I said, it's definitely turned more of an internal, um, I want to say introspective thing, more about myself, more about how I'm changing, how I'm growing, um, how I'm being, that kind of leads then to changes externally, as within, so within, so without, right?
Another one of those ancient sayings.
Yeah. So,
So I guess as we wrap up, right? I mean, we've both kind of shared, what spirituality means to us maybe a couple years later. Some things are the same, some things have changed, but I guess, the important question is, as you're listening, is what does it mean to you,
mhm.
right? Because, that's the important thing. Where are you at right now? What does it mean to you? What are steps you want to take going forward if you're going to continue going down a path like this? And, again, it's not, you don't have to do it the way Brad or I do it, right? But what are some of the things that are going to work for you, to help you in your involvement? Because again, that's what the real goal is here, is to help you, get connected back to source and to grow and evolve while you're in this incarnation on this planet. So. So, with that, everybody, we're going to cut off this episode for this week. But thanks for listening and many blessings to you on your journey. And we'll see you on our next episode.
See you guys then.
All right. See ya.